The biggest financial lie you've been told is that investing is everything. Think about that for a second, because everywhere you look, you hear the same advice. Invest early, invest often, put your money to work. And while that sounds smart, it hides a truth that quietly controls your entire financial life. Cash isn't lazy, cash is power. Most people don't feel broke because they don't earn enough. They feel broke because they don't hold money. Money comes in and immediately flows out. Bills, lifestyle, pressure, expectations. So even when income increases, nothing really changes, because control was never built. And without control, income means nothing. My name is Caesar, and I'm on a mission to take you to financial freedom. Not the flashy version, not the social media version, the real version, the one built on stability, clarity, and quiet power. So if you enjoy simple, straight-to-the-point finance breakdowns like this, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Because what we're about to talk about, most people don't realize until it's too late. Here's the shift you need to understand. Cash is not just money sitting idle. Cash is control. Cash is options. Cash is emotional stability. When you have cash, your decisions change. You don't panic. You don't rush. You don't settle, you choose. And that one difference quietly separates people who struggle from people who move with confidence. Let me explain. Imagine two people earning the same income, same job, same salary. But one has cash reserves, and the other doesn't. When pressure shows up, and it always does, they react completely differently. One is forced, the other is flexible. One accepts bad deals, the other walks away. That's the difference, not intelligence, not luck. Liquidity. Because when you don't have cash, everything becomes urgent. And urgency is expensive. You overpay. You overcommit. You tolerate things you shouldn't. But when you have cash, you slow down. You think clearly. You negotiate better. You wait for the right opportunity instead of chasing the next one. And that patience is where real wealth starts to form. Here's what nobody tells you. The wealthy don't just focus on growing money. They focus on holding money. Because they understand something most people ignore. Opportunities don't come when you're ready. They come when they come. And if you don't have cash when they appear, you miss them. Not because you're not capable, but because you're not positioned. That's the hidden game. Positioning. Cash puts you in position. Position to invest. Position to move. Position to breathe. And maybe most importantly, position to think clearly. Because financial stress doesn't just affect your wallet. It affects your decisions, your confidence, your identity. So when you hear people say, put all your money to work, understand this. Money that gives you peace is working harder than money chasing returns. By the end of this video, you're going to see cash differently, not as something small, not as something temporary, but as the foundation that everything else is built on. Now let's go deeper into something most people never consciously recognize, the desperation trap. This is where the real damage happens, not in your bank account, but in your decision-making. Because when you don't have cash, you don't just lack money, you lack time. And when you lack time, everything starts to feel urgent. You take the job you don't really want, because bills are waiting. You stay in environments that drain you, because leaving feels risky. You say yes too quickly, because you're afraid of missing out. And in that state, you're not choosing your life. You're reacting to it. That's the trap. Desperation doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like being responsible. Sometimes it looks like doing what you have to do. But underneath all of it is pressure. Pressure forces decisions that cost you more in the long run. This is why cash changes everything, because cash removes urgency. And urgency is where bad decisions are born. When you have cash, something powerful happens. You slow down. Not because you're lazy, but because you're no longer being chased by consequences. Let's make this real. Imagine you're negotiating your salary. If you don't have cash saved, You walk into that conversation already compromised. You need the job, so you accept less than you deserve. You avoid pushing back. You tell yourself, it's okay, I'll grow into something better. But the truth is, you settled because you had no leverage. Now flip the situation. You have months of expenses covered. You're not desperate. You're stable. Now you ask better questions. You negotiate with clarity. And if the offer doesn't respect your value, you walk away. Same person, different outcome. The difference? Cash. Now think about your environment. A job that drains you. A situation that slowly kills your motivation. When you don't have cash, you endure. You tell yourself to be patient. You convince yourself it's temporary. But weeks turn into months. And months turn into years. Not because you're weak, but because you're stuck. Cash breaks that cycle. Cash gives you the ability to leave without panic, to reset without fear, to protect your energy without destroying your stability. And that's a level of freedom most people never experience. Here's another one. Opportunities. When something better shows up, a new job, a business idea, a chance to pivot. If you don't have cash, you hesitate. You overanalyze. You let doubt win. Because the risk feels too high. But when you have cash, you can wait. You can evaluate. You can move when it actually makes sense. And that's where the real shift happens. Because when you have cash, you don't chase. You choose. You choose what aligns. You choose what pays off. You choose what protects your future. And that one shift, from chasing to choosing, is what separates people who feel stuck from people who quietly take control of their lives. So understand this clearly: cash is not just a financial tool, it's psychological leverage. It removes pressure, it creates space, and in that space, you start making better decisions. Not rushed decisions, not emotional decisions, but strategic decisions. And over time, those decisions compound into a completely different life. Now let's shift into something even more powerful. Cash is not just about protection. Cash is about opportunity. And this is where the game completely changes, because most people think opportunities are everywhere. They believe if something is good enough, they'll find a way to participate. But the truth is much harsher than that. Opportunities don't wait for broke people. They don't slow down. They don't adjust. They don't care about your intentions. They show up. And they reward whoever is ready in that moment. Not the smartest person, not the most motivated person, the most prepared person. This is where cash becomes a hidden wealth multiplier, because cash doesn't just sit there, it positions you. Let's make this real. Imagine an asset suddenly drops in price: a piece of land, a business, a stock during a market crash. Something valuable becomes temporarily undervalued. Now everyone sees the opportunity. People talk about it. People analyze it. People say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance. But only a few people actually benefit. Why? Because seeing is not the same as acting. And acting requires one thing most people don't have in that moment: liquidity. Cash. So while others are watching, the prepared are moving. They're not scrambling. They're not trying to figure it out. They already positioned themselves before the opportunity arrived. That's the difference. Now think about business. Sometimes, the best opportunities don't come when everything is perfect. They come when someone else is under pressure. A struggling business owner wants out. A partnership becomes available. An idea needs funding right now. There are moments where value is created instantly. But again, if you don't have cash, you can't participate. You hesitate. You miss timing. You watch someone else take what you recognized first. And that's one of the most frustrating financial experiences: seeing the opportunity clearly, but being unable to act. Now here's the deeper truth most people overlook. Cash is not the end goal. It's the tool that lets you play the game. Too many people rush to invest everything they have. They want maximum returns. They want constant growth. But in doing that, they remove their ability to respond. They become fully committed, but completely inflexible. And flexibility is where opportunity lives. This is where we separate two types of people: the investor and the prepared investor. The investor is always looking for opportunities, reading, learning, analyzing. But the prepared investor? They're ready before the opportunity appears. They have cash available. They have clarity. They don't need time to rearrange their life just to act. And because of that, they move faster. They move smarter. And most importantly, they move when it matters. Let's talk about timing. People obsess over timing the market. When should I buy? When should I invest? But timing without readiness is useless, because even if your timing is perfect, if you're not ready, you still lose. Readiness beats timing. Every single time. Because the market doesn't reward predictions. It rewards participation. And participation requires positioning. That's why during market crashes, you see two completely different reactions. One group panics. They sell, they freeze, they focus on loss. The other group buy, calmly, strategically, confidently, not because they're fearless, but because they're prepared. They have cash. They were waiting for this moment. And while others see chaos, they see discounts. This is the hidden side of wealth most people never talk about. Wealth is not just built in growth phases. It's built in moments of imbalance. Moments where value disconnects from price. Moments where pressure creates opportunity. But again, only for those who are ready. So understand this clearly. The best opportunities don't go to the smartest people. They go to the most prepared. Preparation is not luck. Preparation is a decision. A decision to hold cash. A decision to delay gratification. A decision to value flexibility over constant action. And yes, sometimes holding cash feels slow. It feels like you're not doing enough. It feels like you're missing out. But what you're actually doing is building the ability to strike when it matters most. Because when the right opportunity shows up, and it will, you won't be watching from the sidelines. You won't be wishing you had moved differently. You'll be ready. And in that moment, one decision can change your entire financial trajectory. Now let's talk about the part nobody puts in thumbnails, the part that doesn't look impressive, but changes everything. Cash is emotional freedom. And if you've ever lived paycheck to paycheck, you already understand this at a deep level. It's not just about money being tight, it's about what that pressure does to your mind. Every decision becomes heavier. Every expense feels personal. Every unexpected situation feels like a threat. You don't just check your account, you brace yourself before checking it, because you're not sure what you're going to see. And that uncertainty? It drains you. Quietly. Consistently. You wake up thinking about money. You go to sleep thinking about money. Not in a strategic way, in a survival way. Can I afford this? Should I wait? What if something goes wrong? That constant loop is mental exhaustion. And most people normalize it. They think it's just part of being an adult. But it's not. It's a result of not having financial breathing room. Because when cash is low, fear becomes your default decision maker. You avoid risks. Not because they're bad, but because you can't afford mistakes. You delay opportunities, not because they're unclear, but because the downside feels dangerous. You play small, not because you lack ambition, but because you lack margin. And over time, that changes how you see yourself. You become more cautious, more hesitant, less confident. Not because you're incapable, but because you're constantly under pressure. Now let's flip that. When you have cash, the noise starts to fade. You check your account, and there's no tension, no hesitation, just clarity. You stop asking, "Can I survive this?" and start asking, "Does this make sense?" That one shift changes everything. Because now, you're not operating from fear. You're operating from control. Let's make this real. Think about decisions you've made in the past. Opportunities you didn't take. Ideas you didn't pursue. Moves you delayed. Now ask yourself honestly, how many of those decisions were based on logic, and how many were based on fear? And that's what cash fixes. It doesn't make you reckless. It makes you clear. You stop avoiding risk. and start taking calculated risk. There's a difference. Avoiding risk keeps you safe, but stuck. Calculated risk moves you forward with awareness. And you can only take calculated risks when you have a cushion, because the cushion absorbs mistakes. It gives you room to learn, room to adjust, room to try again without collapsing. That's emotional freedom. Now let's redefine something important. Wealth is not what social media shows you. It's not cars. It's not watches. It's not temporary status. Real wealth is peace of mind. It's waking up without financial anxiety. It's making decisions without fear sitting in the background. It's knowing that one mistake won't destroy you. That's the kind of wealth that actually changes your life. And it's built on something simple: cash. Here's a contrast most people ignore. One person wants to make a move, start something new, switch careers, invest in themselves. But before they act, they check their account, and that number decides everything. If it's low, the answer is no. Not because the idea is bad, but because the risk feels unbearable. Now another person, same idea, same opportunity. They check their account, and instead of fear, they feel stability. So they evaluate, they plan, and if it makes sense, they move. Same situation, different emotional state, different outcome. That's what cash does. It doesn't just change what you can afford, it changes how you think. And how you think determines the direction of your life. So when people say, money doesn't buy happiness, they're partially right, but they miss the real point. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it removes the things that make you miserable. The stress, the pressure, the constant uncertainty. And when those things are removed, something powerful replaces them. Clarity, confidence, calm. And from that place, you don't just make better financial decisions. You make better life decisions. Because you're no longer reacting to pressure. You're responding with intention. And that is a level of freedom most people spend their entire lives chasing. Without realizing it starts with something as simple and as powerful as holding cash. Now let's bring everything together. Because understanding this is one thing, but applying it is what actually changes your life. Most people leave videos like this feeling motivated, but nothing changes. Why? Because they don't have a simple system to follow. So let's fix that. Here's the cash strategy most people ignore. Not because it's complicated, but because it requires discipline. Step 1. Stop leaking money. Before you try to build anything, you have to plug the holes. Because it doesn't matter how much you earn. If money keeps escaping, you'll always feel stuck. Look at your spending honestly, not emotionally. Subscriptions you forgot about, impulse purchases, lifestyle upgrades that didn't actually improve your life. This is where your cash is disappearing. And until you control that, you can't build anything solid. This step is not about restriction. It's about awareness. Step 2. Build a cash buffer. This is your foundation. 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Not invested, not touched, available. This is the part most people rush. They want to skip it. They want to invest quickly because it feels productive. But understand this clearly. Investing without a buffer is not strategy. It's pressure in disguise. Because the moment life happens, and it will, you're forced to pull out at the worst time, with the worst outcome. Your buffer protects you from that. It gives you stability. It gives you time. And most importantly, it gives you control. Step 3. Separate your cash from your spending. This is where discipline becomes real. If your emergency cash sits in the same account you spend from, it will slowly disappear. Not all at once, but little by little. So create distance. Different account. Different mindset. This money is not for convenience. It's for protection. When you see it, think, what can I buy? You think, what does this protect me from? That shift matters, because proximity creates temptation, and separation creates control. Step 4. Only invest from strength, not desperation. This is where most people get it wrong. They invest because they feel behind. They invest because they're chasing results. They invest because everyone else is doing it. But investing from desperation leads to bad decisions. You chase hype. You ignore risk. You panic when things go down. That's not investing. That's reacting. Real investing happens when you're stable, when your foundation is solid, when your decisions are not influenced by fear. Because now, you can think long-term. You can stay consistent. You can actually benefit from the process. So remember this. Cash is not sitting still. It's positioning you. Leverage to move. Leverage to wait. Leverage to win. And yes, there will be moments where it feels slow, where it feels like you're not doing enough, where you watch others chase quick wins. But what you don't see is the pressure behind their decisions, the instability, the lack of control. You're building something different, something quieter, but far more powerful. Because at the end of the day, the goal is not to look rich. It's not to impress people. It's not to chase appearances. The goal is to never feel broke again. Starting. To wake up without financial anxiety. To make decisions without fear. To move through life with clarity. That's real wealth. And it starts with something simple. Holding cash. If this changed the way you see money, if something in this made you pause and rethink your approach, then don't just watch and move on. Take it seriously. Apply it. And more importantly, commit to it. Subscribe. And drop a comment saying, "Cash is power." Because that on decision might be the moment everything starts to change for you.